Hey everyone, it's Adam Ratliff with Adam So Fun, and welcome to the December Stitch Along. This is video 1 in the series, and today we are going to be cutting our fabric. I used a fat quarter bundle for this, so I had a ton of leftover fabric. But me being the, I come from a numbers background. I was an accountant before I left to pursue my long arm career. I always look at things and try to cut the most efficient way I can. So that's what I'm going to show you, how I cut these to have, I mean, a ton of leftovers. And this is not even it. I actually made another little mini quilt. So I've used a little bit more than what I needed and changed some things up while I was practicing. So I have a ton of leftover. Again, I'm making another quilt with it. But I loaded up my pattern on my iPad. When you're cutting the aqua pieces, you have the movement dots in aqua and you have the opposing lines in aqua. So this is going to be opposing lines. This is movement dots. You need two 10.5 by 2.5 inch strips of the dots and one 8.5 by 2.5 inch strip of the opposing lines. You do not need 10.5 inch strips of all three. So I did find that. So the correction's been made. It's back up. The new version is up on the internet. So let's cut these aqua strips. So how I do this, when I open a fat quarter bundle, I always iron it. I want everything nice and flat, but we know that fat quarters aren't cut exactly straight. So I usually lay mine down, and I like to lay them in color groups. So I did my, my aqua pieces. I'm gonna line up my selvages. So this is just giving me a base to start out with. I do have a little bit of a seam here in the middle. That's okay. When I finish cutting, I usually just fold them over and stick them back here on my long arm. So I've laid them selvages together. Now, opposite side of my selvage, so selvage here, opposite, I'm going to cut a new straight edge. This is my favorite, one of my favorite rulers. This is the Quilter Select 8.5 by 24 inch ruler. Quilter Select rulers have like a silicone non-stick on the back, which is awesome when you are cutting strips because it keeps this from moving. I mean, my table moves before the ruler does. So I'm going to shore this up and give me a straight edge to start out with. And then I can turn this around and have a nice straight edge here. Now, if I look at my pattern, you can't see this, but I'll read it off to you. I'm in the aqua, so I'm the first two rows. I need a 5.5 inch square from each color for my geese units. I need a 3 3/4 inch square for my quarter square triangle units from each color. And I need from the opposing lines an 8.5 by 2.5 inch strip, and from my dots 2 10.5 by 2.5 inch strips. So how am I going to cut that the most efficient way? First, I'm going to cut myself a 3 3/4 inch strip. Let's make sure I do this right. 1, 2, 3 3/4. Oh, I must have put this tape on when I was making it last time. Some washi tape on a ruler, so you don't always have to try to find that line, is an awesome thing. I always still count again. 1, 2, 3 3/4. So I'm going to cut my strip. So I'm going to get a few things from this strip. I'm going to be able to get my 3 3/4 inch square, which is the first thing I need. So I'm going to shore up one of these sides. Give myself a nice straight edge for my corner. I can spin my strip around. And now I will make my 3 3/4 inch square. So now I have my 2 squares that I need. 1 square from each color. Now I need an 8.5 and a 10.5 inch strip. 1 from each. But I'm going to leave these stacked in this case because they both are 2.5 inches wide instead of 3 3/4. So if I leave these stacked, I can come in. I need my longer ruler for these ones. And I will measure 2.5 inches. And I'm going to trim this extra off. So this, I'm actually making some mini pin cushions for the holidays. These are going to be perfect. So there are my 2.5-inch strips, and now I just have to cut these down to the correct size. This opposing line is 8.5, a little bit extra. My dots are 10.5. A little bit extra. So I have 2 of my border strips, and I have my squares. So I still need my 5 3/4-inch square for my geese, and I need one more 10.5-inch strip just from the dot fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use my ruler to cut out like a 6-inch square from this bottom corner. I like to cut this first piece oversized, and then I'll trim it down. Again, because my edges on this fat quarter are not perfect. So I can cut this here. Slide that over. If I turn this around, I have a perfect kind of square over here, and now I will line that up 5 3/4 all the way around. You have to be careful with the ruler you're using. This one is an 8.5-inch ruler, so you have to make sure that you aren't accidentally not actually 5 3/4. I love a 1/2-inch ruler, but it does kind of hurt sometimes when you cut wrong. So now I'm at my 5 3/4. I will trim this off. I have my 5 3/4-inch square. And then now I just need that one last 10.5-inch strip. I can fold over my fabric here. I have a nice straight edge that we've already used. I will cut a 2.5-inch strip off of this. There we are. This gets folded nicely. Nice-ish. Gets folded nice-ish. Plopped on the long arm. And I can cut this at 10.5. Extra. So now all of my aqua is cut. Not much extra. This is what I'm saying. I try to see the least amount of waste that I can create. Like, how can I cut this with the least amount of waste? This one's the only one that's a little tricky because you have only 2 fabrics instead of 3. When we cut the rest of the colors, like for instance the teal, everything stayed stacked. I had my 3 5 3/4-inch squares that I cut. My 3 3 3/4-inch squares that I cut. And when I cut these strips, I needed 1 8.5 and 2 10.5. I restacked these 2 because I had the extra strip from the 3 3/4, just like we did there. I kept everything stacked, cut them at the 2.5, took this one off, cut this one at 8.5, these 2 at 10.5, and there's all my peacock color. So I will continue cutting the colors out, and then I will come back. I'll show you how I cut the black and cut the white. I guess the black, white, and beige, and then we're going to be done. Oh, and show you how to cut out the panel pieces. They get a little tricky. So we'll see you back here in a second. All right, so I finished cutting all of my blocks from my squares. So I have my aqua, my peacock, flamingo, and mustard, I think. Is that what it's called? Citrine. I called it mustard. So I have all my blocks and border pieces for the colors. They're done. So now I'm going to cut my units for from my other fabrics. So the charcoal, which is like the blackish, I cut a 3 3/4-inch strip, and we just need 1 block from each color. And there are my blocks. So this is going to be extra. There's no way around it. All right, from my taupe fabrics, stacked up, and I did everything the same. Stacked them all up, trimmed up the edge opposite my selvages, cut my strip, 2.5-inch strip, and I needed 4 cuts of 2.5-inch squares. There's those. The only one that's a little bit tricky is going to be the ivory color, which is going to be the whites, because the ivory, how the ivory is set, we need 15 So we need 5 cuts of each fabric at 3 3/4, and then we need 4 cuts of each fabric at 3 1/4. So this is how we're going to do it. I cut 2 strips, 3 3/4 inch strips. I've already trimmed my edges, and from one strip, I'm going to cut 3 squares that are 3 3/4. 3. I need a total of 5, so I'm going to take the other 2 from the other strip. 5. So there are my 5 3 3/4 inch blocks. These are going to end up being the quarter square triangle blocks. Now I need 4 3 1/4 inch squares. So I'm going to trim these strips down to 3 1/4, and I'm going to use my non-stick one for this. And now I can go in and cut my 4 cuts for at 3 1/4 to make these 3 1/4 inch squares. So I'm taking 3 from the longer piece. I just have a little bit of waste, and then 1 from the shorter piece, and there's my 4. And now everything is cut, and this is all my waste. I have my fabrics thrown over my long arm. That's where I usually keep fabric after I cut them. So now let's get into the panel itself. The panel has some dash lines on it, and I'm going to go ahead and cut it right in the middle, on that line, or somewhat on that line-ish. It doesn't have to be super specific, because we're going to trim these down. The one problem with panels that are printed like this is that the lines are never straight. They're just not printed straight. But we're gonna get around that, because we're gonna trim that block up to how we want it. So I'm only gonna do half of this. We'll throw these ones back here. These extra panel pieces, they get put aside. They get put in the stack, so we can use our scraps and make something out of those. Now I have these 2 panel pieces. I don't have to trim off the side. I actually don't have to trim off anything, because we're going to trim it when we actually trim the block. So these need to be trimmed down to 10.5 wide by 12.5 tall. All right, so here's the panel piece. Here's my ruler. I've marked off the areas with washi tape. The center of this block is at 5 1/4 by 6 1/4, so it lies right here. So I'm going to kind of center it, but you can't really just center it on the design, because the design doesn't really sit centered. So I just pull this around and kind of slide my ruler around until I like the way it looks. I usually say, okay, here's the bottom of the block. So if I have this, the block is I'm going to cut about 1 inch lower than its butt. And if I look up here, I have 3 inches above its ear. So I can definitely slide this down. And so I had 3 inches here, 1 inch here. How about if I do 2 and 2? So I'm going to slide this down to something about there. That gives me about 1 3/4 inches, and this gives me about 2 inches. And then I do the same thing from right to left. So this is kind of the leftmost point, and I have 2 3/4 over here, and this is the rightmost point, and I have 1 1/4. So I can go over about 3/4 inches, making sure that everything's falling into my square. And I'll come back here. That's about 2. That's a little over, let's see. This is almost 2. That looks pretty good. I might shift it just a tad. And once I get it the way I look, I can cut. Now you can see this isn't straight because these aren't really printed straight. Let me see if I can cut this backwards and upside down. Oh, it worked. All right, so once I have this, I just flip that block around, and these are straight corners now because those are the ones I just trimmed. I can line them up. It's going to get lined up about right there. So 10.5 by 12.5. and trim up. And now I have my first block, 10.5 by 12.5. Now, I know what you're saying. I don't have a big 25 or 21.5 or 20.5 inch square ruler. What do I do? The other thing you can do is kind of just fold the blocks. Fold them where you think the center is. Don't fold them where the center like is marked. You can try it and see, but again, things aren't printed right. So kind of fold where you think the center might be, and then fold it again where you think the center might be, or you can just fold it one way. Ooh. This one's going to be a little bit different, so let me tell you why. Because this is going to swing outside of the block. How it's printed to get the 10.5 and not cut off any of the sloth. We're going to cut this off. So I'm actually going to fold it this way, because I want that to be part of the block, or in the seam. So let's see. If I fold it in half, we need 5 1/4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 1/4. I can line this up, and it's going to give me just about a 1/4 inch away from its head after, or it will give me about a 1/2 inch away from its head once I add that seam allowance. So I might want to shift this over just a little bit. There's its spot. Because you have to think, you're going to take that seam allowance off of each edge. So this is going to give me, if I take a 1/4 inch off, we're going to get 1, 2, about 3/4 away. And I like that a lot better. So I'm going to trim this up. So now we know we're 10.5 inches wide. My whole block. Now I still have some of the dash lines over here. That's okay, because that's going to get trimmed off, or that's going to be in our seam anyway. So now I can kind of fold the block in two. And if you look, you might not be able to see this. His hands are here, his butt is here. So I'm going to shift this down a little bit. And now they're kind of in the same plane. And now I need 6 1/4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 1/4. Line this up on that seam. And cut. And now I've trimmed this block up to 10.5 by 12.5. I went to flip it because I was like, it's upside down, but it's upside down for me, not you. So that is how you trim the panel blocks. All right, everyone, that wraps up the cutting video, or video 1 for the Day at the Zoo quilt. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon so you see when the other videos come out in the series and all my other videos. And hopefully you're having fun, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye, y'all.